Look at us getting deep.
It's just a book about vampires, guys.
I know, like a lot of
And here we are,
reading
like,
so
it's
much
like
into
life.
it. Oh god.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Romance and the Monsters. I'm Em,
I'm Seff.
and this week we are talking about Kiss of Steel by Beck Beckmaster. What is this book about, Seff?
All right, so the setting is steampunk. And
Yes.
it's, I want to say this first. Like, this was like my first steampunk book. Like, it was the first
Mine
one I've
too.
ever really?
Yeah.
Oh. Anyways, I just thought it was
It's not a
interesting.
genre that ever attracted me before.
Yeah,
But then I
same.
heard that this one had, like, vampires, which I don't know if steampunk usually means that there's creatures. It probably does.
Yeah.
But now I'm interested.
Yeah, me too. I honestly, okay, for me, the setting kind of reminded me of, I don't know if you watch the show Penny Dreadful.
No, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that in the sense where, like,
It's dark, gritty.
they're creatures, but it's still set in London, and, like, it's still, like, including the rich ton of London. So it kind of reminded me of that. And I really liked it. I was like, okay, I like where this world is going. I like how it's developing. Because Penny Dreadful is one of my favorite shows, and I think everyone should watch it.
I love the soundtrack.
Yes. Yeah. So good. I love the music for that show. Anyways, back to the synopsis. So the story starts off with Honoria, who basically has her two siblings that she takes care of. She's working hard in, I guess, what they would call the rookeries. So it's like the underground or the underbelly of, like, is it set in London? I actually don't even know the setting of this book.
It is set in London.
Okay.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so basically it's set there. And then we also meet Blade, who's basically the man in charge of the rookeries and the underbelly of London.
It's called Whitechapel.
Yes. The Devil of Whitechapel.
Yes.
That's his title.
Of course.
Anyways, he's scorned by the Rich Ton, which is, don't even ask me how to say it.
It's called the Echelon.
There you go.
Echelon.
I think it's Echelon. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's, scorned by the Rich Ton because he wasn't part of the nobility, wasn't part of, like, the...
Well, he's considered a rogue.
Yeah, because he wasn't turned with the... I don't even know how to explain it. Like, he wasn't...
Because he rejected the idea of the Echelon, I think.
But I think it was also the way he was turned as well. Like, he wasn't...
He's not of the high society.
Yeah.
He was born a peasant, poor... like, I think he was living in... like the sewers or something.
Yeah.
Like he didn't come from high society, so he wasn't considered a blue blood. He was considered a rogue, and then he went to Whitechapel and made it his kingdom.
Yeah. So there, we see Honoria. She's working as basically a tutor, helping people with their speech and also just in general. She's just a tutor.
Etiquette.
Yeah, etiquette, finishing school and all of that. So it starts off with her getting called to meet with Blade because she's literally a unmarried woman and she's living without any protection. So I guess Blade needed to discuss with her what will happen in that sense. So she offers, to Blade that she'll help him with his grammar and his speech because he speaks with a very Cockney accent. And he has a lot of London slang in his accent, and I think at this point
he butchers language is what he does. It was low-key hard to understand sometimes.
It was so hard. Were you doing the audiobook or were you reading it?
No, I read it.
Yeah, I was reading it too, and I kept stumbling because I couldn't figure out what he was trying to say for some of the words. But I feel like after a few chapters, you got a hang of like what he was trying to say, but some words I still was like hung up on because I didn't really know what was going on.
Does your brain try to supplement the words that are butchered with the right words? So
Yeah.
that in your brain you're not really reading the accent, you're just
Yeah.
reading a normal sentence?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
That was
I
me.
feel like I feel like that's more work
I'm pretty
instead of
sure
just
it
reading it
was.
like it is.
I'm pretty sure it was. But anyways,
Yeah.
Honoria is fleeing from the echelon, the high society, because of her father, who was pretty much working on a cure for this virus, which basically it's not really, so being a vampire isn't something that we're like, it's not like the usual vampire that we're used to. It's like a virus, like any other virus. You get it by ingesting a blue blood's blood, or an open wound. Like, anyways, it's just a virus, okay?
Seff,
And
it's
her
the
father,
plague again.
what?
It's the plague again. We just literally cannot it's not like we do this on purpose.
It's not.
It just so happens
The
that
fucking
every
plague again. Like, it's just a theme since we started this podcast. It's literally the plague after plague. You know
I
what?
wonder if okay, here's the thing. I wonder if the plague has always been this present. We just haven't noticed it.
I wonder.
But we're noticing it now because of what's going on.
I wonder.
Because it's been a constant thing in every single book we've read.
That's true.
Almost. If not every book.
I mean, like, I feel like now I'm going to be more aware reading books.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm going to
for
actually
sure.
look for mentions of viruses or plagues or sicknesses.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, that's an interesting thought. I never really thought about that before. But I do realize majority of our books that we choose happen to have some sort of disease in there.
And not on purpose, which
No.
that's the funny part of it. That's the interesting part. I don't know if our brains are somehow connected or plugged onto that plague narrative or not, but here we are.
I
Another
know.
plague book. I mean, it's not technically a plague, but it was at some point, I think. They
Yeah.
say, like, at some point, but then they killed off a bunch of people, so...
Yeah, they killed
Anywho.
off the rogues, basically, and then the ones... So basically how it works with this virus is that you're living with it for the rest of your life. It's like you contract herpes or whatever, and, like, you live with it for the rest of your life. And
However, it gets worse.
yeah, it gets worse. You deteriorate until you become, like, some creepy-ass rabid vampire that you don't even form your own thoughts. Like, you're only... Like, you exist only to eat and to feed and kill people. And I feel like they reminded me of, like, the Priest vampires. Have you seen that movie? Priest?
No.
Oh,
No.
it's like, remember, it's like the guy, he has, like, a big cross on his forehead. Obviously, he is a priest. And, like, his job is to kill vampires. And the vampires literally reminded me of the vampires of this book.
Oh, no, I haven't.
And they
Never
were
heard of it.
scary. I was so scared. I was like, these aren't the sexy vampires I'm used to. But anyways, so they become full-on rabid vampires, and they have to be put down once they reach that stage. What happens after is that she later loses her job because her brother, you find out later on, is also fighting the virus, and she's doing whatever she can to stop the virus from making him become a blue blood, which is, like, I guess the term they use before they become a rabid vampire. They only use the word vampire when they're referring to the rabid, crazy, murderous type of creature
Before
that they
that, it's
become.
blue blood, yeah.
Yeah. And so she loses her job, sadly. And then they also find out that she's been lying about her references and she's not from Oxford. And so she really needs a job. She needs to find some sort of income because she needs to take care of her sister and her brother. She decides to go to another man of high society who you later find out is her half-brother, Leo. And so basically he's her dad's son, and, like, no one else knows about it but her. But he's a vampire. Not a vampire, sorry. He's a blue blood. But he refuses to give her access to her inheritance that her father had left her. So she then goes to Blade, who, she offers to be his thrall, which is basically a human feeder. And
Yeah, a blood slave.
basically, and apparently, like every other vampire book, being a blood slave is highly erotic, and you enjoy the feeding.
It's also very well regarded in that society. Or, you have
You're a kept woman. basically.
Yes, but you do have, what's the word I'm looking for? Privilege.
Yeah.
Like, it's a privilege it's considered a privilege for
Yeah.
women to be a thrall.
Yeah.
Even though you're a kept woman.
It
like,
kind of, yeah, it kind of like reminded me of like, you know, London society mistress. Like she would be like obviously like a kept woman, but she would have like the privileges. She would have like the money, the house, the gifts, whatever, you know, your vampire wants to give you. But more or less, she would basically be ruined in the eyes of society.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really interesting that like as a thrall, she would have these privileges, but like.
But you're also food.
You're just food. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an added layer to, like, because you said mistress, but it's an added layer because not only are most of them like most of those blue bloods have body rights, I think they called it, or whatever it was, so like sex, but also you're food to them. So it's very interesting because you're seen as having a certain privilege for your position, but also are you not dehumanized, you know? Like, it's, I don't know.
And I feel like it kind of resembles, like, I guess, London in that time, or, like, basically anywhere at that time, where, like, as a mistress, yeah, you have all these privileges, but, like, as a prostitute or as, like, a lady of the night, you obviously don't get those privileges. You're literally living on the street, more or less, and that's, I guess, the same case with the drainers. You get money, and lots of it, I guess, for your own blood, but at the end, you're still treated like shit, and you basically die in, like, a few weeks.
Well, also, the idea of the blood tax. It's not just you give some of your blood because you want the money, but also you have to.
True.
People have to donate
Yeah.
some of their blood in order to feed the blue bloods of society. Yeah. That's wild. You have to, and in some cases you get so poor that these people literally drain themselves to death trying to survive. So interesting.
It is. As I said, steampunk isn't something I usually read. It's not a genre I go about looking, you know, to read. But I felt like this one was really interesting, and I don't know if this is a common theme for steampunk. Like you said, like I don't know if, you know, vampires and werewolves, which are also in this book, are they a common theme in steampunk romances? So I thought it was really interesting. Anyways, continuing on with the synopsis. We also get to meet our first rabid vampire who basically... Okay, they smell really bad, and, like, I was really envisioning the stench of them, and I'm like, how could you, like, be around that?
Well, because they wear so much perfume.
I know.
They're, like, wearing wigs because they lose all their hair. They're using, like, powders to look a little bit less white, translucent. They are wearing, like, a bunch of perfume to try to hide the stench of them. But
I was talking more of, like, the actual rabid vampire that was, like, attacking people in the Whitechapel area.
Him.
And I'm like,
smell him.
Ew.
But
So, yeah, her brother ends up getting, like, really, really bad to the point where, like, he starts chewing his own arm because he really wants that blood. And, like, it's pretty bad. And then, anyways, as his thrall, he only demands that she feeds him every 3 weeks. So, like, once every 3 weeks because apparently...
She's not used to it yet. She's weak. She hasn't been eating enough.
But that's a common thing, I think. Like, even Esme, later on in the book, who also happens to be one of his thralls, but also his housekeeper, she only feeds him, like, once in a while. Same with Will.
Well, because he rotates, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, like, kind of makes me question, like, how much blood does these blue bloods need? Like, they need a lot.
Well, the higher your levels are, the more blood you need, I believe. I could be wrong.
No, you're right.
But I believe that's how it works.
No, you're right. Because I remember her talking about, like, how vampires usually you'll need, like, 0.6 pints of blood, or 0.6 of a pint, of blood. But he was at, like, over a pint at one point.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's a lot of blood.
Anyway, our boy needs feeding.
Anyways, things happen, and you find out that as her brother is getting sicker, Honoria decides to go search for her father's diaries that she leaves coincidentally at Blade's sister's graveyard. She picks them up, and then she somehow loses them, but not really. Esme, which is also his housekeeper, takes the diaries, and then she obviously has to go back to retrieve them. And do you know what happens? Marge, do you know what happens? Do you remember?
Well, then she does, and they have sex, or they make out, and then he drinks her blood, and...
No, that's not what...
No?
Oh my God, what happens is this girl, yes, they start making out, and then she, by mistake, nicks him with her poison, and she's like, oh, well, this works out.
Yes. Oh my God, that scene is epic.
I was laughing so hard, but I was also like, girl, find those diaries now. But
yeah.
She nicks him.
You feel the intensity.
And he's paralyzed, and all he can do is look at her, give her the death stare. And, like, she just keeps looking over her shoulder as she's looking in his room for the diaries. And, like, she's like, oh, shit, this man is going to kill me once he wakes up.
Because the poison only only works for a certain window of time, but because his levels are so high, the poison doesn't work as well on him. So it's like, instead of 10 minutes, she only has a window of like 2 minutes, and she doesn't know that, obviously, because she's never used it before. So it's just amazing scene of just him starting slowly to like not be paralyzed, and you're like, oh my God, girl, run.
It was so good, because like he kept like making little snide comments as she is looking, and he's slowly waking up, but at one point he fully like moves his body like to the point where like he's like, it was funny to envision it.
And he's giving her the death stare, and you're like, retribution will be so delicious.
Yeah. And it does become delicious, pun intended.
Yeah, it does.
Because like later on he's like, you know what, now you need to feed me, because I lost a lot of blood because of this poison, and I need to be in tip-top shape, because you know what, Leo,
we're fighting a vampire.
Sorry, yes, that's also it, but also Leo was also waiting for him, which is part of the high society. And then it was, what are the Night Walkers, is that what the other yeah, so they were also waiting for him because they are hunting the vampire together. But he takes that opportunity to finally taste her blood, and that
Get a
was
little taste.
Hot AF, I will say. Like,
again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's never not hot when someone drinks your blood. It's always sexual. It's always great. It's always orgasmic in every sense of the word.
Well, yeah, and I think it brings it back to what you said. I don't remember which episode it was, when you talked about how back in the day, in the 1800s, or even further, I don't remember, they used to exchange blood.
Yeah.
And that's so interesting.
They used to think that blood was exchanged between partners during sex. Yes.
Yeah. Anyways, gets heated, and then she realizes, actually, no, he's a blue blood. I don't like them. I hate them. And she literally skedaddles out of there.
Skedaddles.
Yeah, she's gone. Anyway, she finally decides to go back, and that made no sense. She finally decides that she needs Blade's help, because Charlie, her brother, is actually so bad. Like, he's worse off than she had thought originally, and he begs her to get help, to either put him out of his misery, meaning kill him, or find some other way to help him. And she decides to finally confide in Blade and tell him that her brother is actually battling the virus. And usually the Echelon would probably kill him, so she was taking a big gamble because she didn't know what Blade would have done to her brother. But, I mean, at this point I felt like she should have known that he would not have, he would not have killed, her brother or anything like that. But anyways, I feel like that was their turning point in their relationship.
I also think that that scene sort of poses a really interesting question of, are you trying to save your brother and find a cure, or are you just being selfish? That's
a point I have here that I want to talk about.
I think that was a really big turning point for her, because she realized in that moment, I'm just being selfish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm letting my brother suffer because he hasn't gone through the transition yet. He has to have blood in order to go through the transition. I think he needs to have blue blood.
Yeah, he does.
And so he's suffering because this virus is just eating at his body, essentially.
Yeah.
Or that's how I kind of understood it. And she realizes, like, I'm just being selfish. And I think why this is a turning point for the relationship as well is because in realizing that she's been selfish, she also realizes my family needs this. We need the protection of this man. And so by refusing this, I'm being selfish again.
Mm-hmm.
Like she realizes that she's just pushing things away for no reason that could offer protection or could save her brother or give him a better life or whatnot. So
no, I agree. And I think she also realizes how not how awful she was, but how selfish she was when Blade confided in Charlie about killing his sister, and like how Charlie said that he envisions and dreams of drinking his sister's blood, and like I feel like that's when she realized, oh my god, like I honestly was torturing my brother, and it was a turning point, and like that's that whole saying like too much love can be a poison, and I felt like in this sense it was that poison.
Absolutely.
Like she was like slowly making her brother go crazy, and like even in the end of the book, they don't have that brother and sister bond that they probably had before him like becoming a vampire. Sorry, not a vampire, blue blood. Like he's still afraid of being alone with her, and it's like not that he doesn't love her, it's just he's afraid of like what he could do. But maybe if she had met Blade earlier or like confided in him earlier, maybe that would not have been the issue between them. But yeah.
I also think there's a weird link between how she sees her brother as her little brother, and it's almost as if when he goes through the transition, it's like he becomes a man in a way. Like he's not like them anymore.
Yeah.
He's his own person, his own thing. And so I almost wonder if there's a little bit of that too, of just not wanting him to grow up or keeping on seeing him as this fragile child as opposed to this growing young man.
Yeah. I think that's what it was, because when she finally talked about seeing him on his feet, like he didn't sound like a child at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I was questioning, I was like, how, like throughout the whole book I was like, how old is like Charlie, like how old is he actually? Because
I think in that book he's 13.
Yeah.
So definitely on the verge of becoming a young man.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think you realize that later on, but as I was reading the book, I was like, this kid must be like 6 or 7. Like he can't be older than that, because of the way she talked about him, the way she treated him. I get it that he was slowly like dying.
Also because once he goes through the transition, he is taken under the shoulders of Blade and with Rip, and because not Rip, you don't know that yet, but Rip also becomes a vampire.
Rip becomes
at some
a vampire.
Point. So he's kind of taken under their wings, and because they understand his situation as well. And I've read book 2, and he's really quite independent. Like you don't really get the sense that Honor is being a parent, because she was being the parent.
She was,
and
yeah.
She also realized with Elena, like you can't be her mom.
No, I agree.
She's grown up.
Yeah, she was acting the mom because her dad did leave her sister, and her brother to take care of, and I think her allowing her brother to become a blue blood was in her eyes at that time like she was failing. Because her whole life has been seeing these not vampires but also vampires, seeing these blue bloods and their life and the way they regard human life, and she never wanted her brother or anyone that she loved to be like that. So at that time she thought she was failing, but of course her opinion changes later on.
Yeah, and that's another sort of interesting question that the book brings up is the whole. I really thought that the sisterly relationship between Lena and Honor was really interesting as well, because like you said, in a way, she's kind of the mom of the family. But she's also the sister, and they have this very contentious relationship, and I always love that in books. I have sisters, you have a sister, like us as sisters. Like I find that, for me personally, when sisterly bonds are represented as a little bit more complex than you would think, like the whole, oh, we're so close, we're best friends, we're essentially the same person, we never fight, we're just so that's never spoken to me.
No, I
personally.
I agree.
And so I love when books depict sisterly bonds in a more complicated manner.
Because I feel
we're not always on the same page.
No, I agree. And I honestly feel like because that, oh, we're best friends, like she's my soulmate, that's more of like an unrealistic portrayal of a sisterly bond.
I mean, I'm sure for some people that's the case, but
for some people, for sure. But I mean, like you can't say that you don't fight with your sibling. I feel like that's a common thing, at least in my house.
Oh yeah, for sure. And especially because their situation is so tense.
Especially for Lena and Honor, I agree.
I find that, those kinds of, like, your relationship with your sister evolves as you go through life.
Yeah.
When one of you is going through something that's very stressful, the relationship is more difficult. And then as you grow up and, you get more settled in your own life, and, you're able to sort of repair that relationship, but then ultimately, like, it can always, go back to how it was or stay as it is. Like, every relationship is like that.
No, yeah, it's not just sisters. It's basically any relationship. Yeah. And I honestly agree with that point, 100%. And I felt like for Honor, it was more of like a struggle for her to find that balance between being a mother and also being a sister. And she struggled like with that immensely. And I felt like in the beginning of the book, she was more like that motherly figure. But towards the end, she's like, actually, my siblings need to live a life and I need to let them, be who they are. I think that happened more with Charlie than Lena. I don't think she really talked much about Lena and her relationship, minus, like what was going on with the vampire coming and like almost killing Lena, but actually didn't. You realize that the vampire didn't even attack Lena. But you know what we didn't answer? Did you like the story?
Oh, we'll go back to that.
Okay.
But it's a constant work in progress, is what I was trying to say. And not just between, it's a constant work in progress between Charlie and Honor and Lena. It's a constant work in progress also with Leo.
Yeah.
Who is another interesting thing, because he's the bastard, and yet he's the one that's posing in society as a duke, but he's not really, because he's not legitimate. So that's interesting, like their relationship as well, because he's protecting them, but also he is very much distances himself from the family. But by the end, you kind of feel that he cares for them. Yeah, he does. But he doesn't want their secret to come out. Like, he doesn't want to lose his place in society, and so he doesn't really want to acknowledge that family.
No, yeah, I agree. And also, I think the book still ended with Lena and Charlie not knowing Leo is their brother.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, I don't think they know. And so I think that's going to be a very big shake-up and a very big change of dynamic, because they know Leo is obviously the Duke of Kane or whatever, and they obviously lived with him and grew up with him, but they never really saw him as anything more than just another rich man's son. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that's going to play out, which I kind of want, I want to continue on and read more, because I did see that Leo gets a book, and I also see that Will and Lena get a book together, so that's going to be interesting.
That's book 2. I've read it. And I loved it.
That's good.
Which brings us to, we completely forgot to say if we liked this book or not. So, Seff, what did you think of this book?
I enjoyed it immensely. I liked it. I'm not in love with it, but I really did like it.
I feel like enjoy immensely is a very big claim.
No, I mean, it's like, hey, what I mean by it is like, I'm not in love with it, but I enjoyed it as I read it.
Okay. Yeah, you had fun.
Yeah, I had fun.
Okay, yeah.
Which, I mean, was a big feat in itself because, as we said earlier, that it was hard to find a book that we could all finish and one that we, liked.
We were kind of in a book slump, guys.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of the same. Like I enjoyed it a lot. I was surprised that I did. But there were certainly certain aspects of the story that I wasn't as into. This is a romance novel, but it's very plot heavy. It has to be said. Like the actual investigation plot, I guess you could say, is, just as much at the forefront of the story as the romance itself. Yeah. So, and I do feel like sometimes it does take away from the romance a little bit because, they're not together in every scene, which that's fine. But sometimes they're just talking about who is this vampire and they're just hunting the vampire. And you're like, okay, cool. But like, can we get the kisses now?
Yeah. That's one thing I had to say about this story. I felt like the romance, or I guess like the physical aspect of the romance started so late on into the story. Yeah. And I'm like, finally! Like, it felt like it just was never going to happen.
But there's great tension to get get to that point.
Oh, yeah. So their sexual tension was great. Oh my gosh. Okay. Can I talk about this? Okay. Yes. I just felt like so I think we kind of already touched upon it, but I just felt like the vampirism, or like the vampires.
Yes, I want to talk about that too.
As how different it is
from
regular vampires that we're used to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Go ahead.
Wait, what did you want to talk about?
No, that.
Oh.
Exactly that.
Okay, anyways.
We are confused, people.
We really need
It's been a while. I don't know you, Seff, anymore.
Like, I love how we're, like, secretly trying to read each other's minds right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
Usually we're, like, on the same wavelength, but right now we're not.
No, my antenna was skewed a bit.
Straighten it.
All right. That's straight. Anyways. Yeah, so we'd like to talk about how different these vampires or blue bloods are from what we're used to, like the stereotypical vampire or like the traditional vampire, I guess I should say. Yep. They were really different.
I love that there's two types in the sense that there's a blue blood / a rogue, or there's a vampire, because a vampire is when you've gone through the fade, I think is what they call it. Yeah. And your levels are so high that by that point you're a monster. Yeah. You are not human anymore. You've lost the entire. What I find is so interesting is that your body is essentially decaying as your levels go up. However, as it decays, it also grows in strength. So you're becoming stronger and stronger. Your senses are stronger and stronger, and you're losing your humanity as well. Because once you're a vampire, well, actually, the book kind of says something interesting about that. Because do you really lose the entirety of your humanity? Because the father, spoiler alert, the father is the vampire in this book. Yeah, which is like a big plot twist at the end. He recognizes his daughters. He does. He doesn't want to hurt them. Yeah. So you lose your humanity, ? But you also don't.
I think
because he remembers
you
them.
lose everything that makes you at that point as you become a vampire. So it's like the idea that he has his humanity, he does, but like at which point is that enough? Like he still is killing people. He still is murdering and ripping people apart and causing havoc. But he still remembers and loves his daughters.
He retains some of it because he asks them, help me, kill me. Like, he is aware. It's almost as if he's battling between the vampire in him. Yeah. And still the remainder of his past self, who is aware of the horrible things that he's doing, and he's asking for mercy, and he's asking for death. Like, he knows. So I don't know. It's even to that point, it's still not quite so black and white. Like, you're not fully just a monster, like a killing machine.
I agree. And like, I think it makes me also question like him as a person when he was a human, because he was the whole like anti-blue blood or whatever. He didn't support vampirism. He still like infected his children and like gave them the cure.
With the vaccine, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like that's how Leo became a blue blood. That's how also Charlie became a blue blood.
Because he hated Leo. The father figure was really interesting because it's not black and white.
Exactly.
He's very gray. You think you're not sure you're supposed to like him.
Yeah.
He's done horrible things. He's done good things. And I feel like it gets even more muddled when you read book 2 and you hear more about some of the things that he did when he was alive. It's an interesting figure. It's certainly like, I guess, I mean, I was going to say he's the villain of the story. He's not, because it's Vikers, but
I have another question about Vikers.
Okay.
So for me, I'm like, my question is like, yeah, quote unquote, I guess like on paper, he was a stereotypical villain. But like, if you look deeper, he wasn't really like, you know, just as black and white. I feel like that's what this episode should be called, Black and White. Because like, he was evil. He did destroy everyone's lives, meaning Blade, Emily, Honoria, like basically everyone. But he wasn't really that one-dimensional. Like, I honestly felt like he was doing that because he just didn't want to become a vampire. He didn't want to lose what made him him. So, like, I just thought he was interesting. He was an interesting character to me.
I can't say that he's I trust me. There's been many villains that I've read about that have made me go, but I kind of feel for this guy, you know?
No, I didn't necessarily feel for him.
Not in this case.
I believed what he was fighting for. I didn't care for him. I wanted him dead, but
I think he was afraid. He was a scared man.
Yeah.
That's what he was.
Exactly.
And don't want to get into the monster of the story yet, but you know, there's certainly a monster there for him. You know, he's afraid of the monster that he could become.
Exactly.
or he doesn't want to. I think actually what it is not so much he's afraid of what he could become. He's afraid of what he could lose.
That's also.
He would lose his privilege, he would lose his position, he would lose his life because he would have to be put down. However, there's definitely a debate of because of how high his position is in society, would he really be put down? Or would they let him live? You know, because they have no issue with killing off but like poor blue bloods or rogues.
Yeah.
But do they make as much of an effort when it comes to the higher ups? I don't know.
I feel like that even relates to like life today in like our world.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
I think in that sense, because they found out that he was a vampire or like really close to the Fade, when everyone was together and it was very public, that the Night Walkers, is that what they're called? The Night Walkers?
Yeah, it is. The Night Walkers.
Okay, yeah.
They're like parts. Oh, that's another interest. There's a lot about humanity in this book. and what is human and what isn't.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, so I feel like they were going to kill him at that point because one, everyone was watching, and two, he was basically beyond that point. But I'm pretty sure if it was in private and they found out that he was a vampire or was close to being a vampire, I don't know. I feel like that's a question that...
Well, people knew, some of them knew that he was close to the Fade and they let him live.
Exactly, they smelled him.
Because he was holding on to that power with all his might, you know?
Yeah.
And like you said, it's very reminiscent of our own society where you have very few white men at the tippy top of the pyramid that hold all the power and all the money, and then everyone else is just below trying to survive. You know what I mean? Well, That's kind of a pessimist view of our world, but you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
There's 8 dukes that essentially decide the fate of everyone. Mm-hmm. Plus, there's actually, I'm appreciating this book more with time because I just remember the whole thing with the what do they call it? The prince consort, the prince regent, the prince
consort,
and the queen, who, that's so interesting. She gets a novella.
Really?
She does. And I'm very intrigued because so essentially how it works is that the queen is the queen. However, we are told that the prince consort holds most of the power. He's very manipulative. He is the one taking the decisions, and the queen just acts out whatever he says. he's a blue blood, she's human. So that's another interesting thing there. I just think that's a very ambiguous relationship right there that I just think is interesting. So knowing she gets a book
Yeah.
or a novella is that means he won't be in the picture eventually. I haven't gotten to that part, but
it is interesting because ultimately she was the reason why Blade became Sir Henry whatever, because he was the reason why he was allowed to get his revenge on Vickers or however you say his name. She made that decision to make him a knight.
that was her going against him. He didn't want that.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. She made that decision.
Yeah.
And so that made his claim on Honoria, made Blade's claim on Honoria recognized in their society. Which also, we didn't talk about Honoria getting kidnapped, but she does, by Vickers.
She does. But yeah, because you think, well, this is, I mean, it's kind of a callback to our Beast of Bezek episode where we said that, you know, society in itself is sort of a monster for women in this time period, especially, but I mean, still to this day. Because of, in that book, the sisters are put in a situation where their only options are to go seek help from a man.
Yeah.
This is the same here, but it's also interesting how you have a queen. So you're like, she should have all the power in the world. She's the queen. She's at the top. And yet,
but she doesn't.
The book says, not really.
Yeah.
Not really. It's still a man. It's still a man that's in charge
whispering
of things.
words into her ear.
I was cheering her on when she made that decision because it's on page that, you know, there's going to be consequences for what she just did.
Yeah.
But she chooses to do that still, to stand up and say, I am declaring you a knight. And that ends all debates. No one can kill him.
Yeah.
He can just live on, and it's interesting. She's an interesting character for sure. And she doesn't really get much page time.
She doesn't. and I think Honoria also mentions that she obviously went against the council, went against all of the, you know, the people in the echelon. And that she wasn't probably going to get any more help from her because she made such a drastic decision on her own. And I mean, like, obviously she was talking in terms of Blade surviving because he did have, you know, a bout of bloodlust when he killed Vickers. So I thought that was really interesting, like you said. So I'm really curious now that you told me that she has a novella. I'm kind of curious to see what her book would be like.
I mean, I hope I didn't, like, hallucinate that, but I'm pretty sure she does. I think. There's even, like, a spin-off series of this series.
I did see that.
The brother's book is in the other series.
Oh, so he grows up. Oh, so I thought it was really interesting also that these vampires age. Not vampires,
They do.
blue bloods.
Yeah, they're not immortals.
Yeah.
Well,
which is another...
Are they? Would they be immortal once they're vampires?
I think, yeah, unless someone kills them. Yeah, I think at that point.
They're like essentially zombies. They're corpses that are still alive.
Yeah, and they need that blood to survive. And, like, I feel like it was really interesting how they described a blue blood. Like, I have it saved because, like, obviously it's not something we're used to. We're used to vampires smelling, like, sexy and, like, they're so alluring and, like, they're just beautiful. And, like, how Blade describes them, it's like, sorry, I have the quote here. A blue blood has no personal scent, no warmth. Sometimes he felt as though he was slowly turning to marble, devoid of any of the touches of humanity that surrounded him, until nothing but the hunger remained. So I think that's really interesting, like, the way that they describe blue bloods. It's, like, something that we're used to vampires being the ultimate sexy. Like, you want a vampire, and you want to be a vampire. Usually, like, that's my mentality. But, like, if this is a vampire in our world, like a blue blood, I don't necessarily think I'd want to be one because of, like, the way they're described and, like, the way that they're, talked about.
No. I wouldn't either. Like, there's nothing...
They don't even have the fangs, okay?
I mean, okay, once you have the fangs, then what? Like, you become a corpse? I don't want to become a corpse.
Right? They have, like, a whole... Like, all their teeth become razors. But, like, as a blue blood... They use razors. They don't have teeth. Their teeth aren't sharp enough to cut your skin.
Oh, that's right.
Honoria did talk about it. She's like how some blue bloods do change their teeth to resemble fangs. Like, they sharpen them. is there any books in this series? Because
No.
the feeding between Will and Blade was so high. I was actually I was on Rhea, watching them, and it was hot, okay?
That's another ambiguity in the book. Like, Will, because, okay, so the saliva of vampires, shockingly, is very erotic and orgasm inducing. And so Will is one of Blade's thralls, which is a very interesting thing. And Will is a werewolf.
Yeah.
This is another virus in this world.
Yes. All the viruses,
it's
all
a different
the plagues.
one. But, werewolves are very horny. That's kind of the norm.
Yep.
And so, obviously, the saliva of Blade works wonders on Will, who is a very young, active male. Well, not sexually active. He's actually a virgin. But, he's a very energetic
let's
man
just say
with a lot of stamina.
Let's just say the feeding made him hump the air.
It did. And he says that at one point in the past, Will actually reached out to touch
His
Blade
dick.
during a feeding, and Blade went, no.
I would have wanted it. I mean, obviously not, Honoria is his match, but I mean, I kind of need to read an book now in the series. I want to know how it would work out.
When do I not? I'm always gonna look for a good book. Let's be real. Yes. All the yes. But it's so interesting, though, because Will's book was interesting, and he hates women. He hates them.
He does, and he does have a reason.
He's been mistreated.
He does have a reason to hate them.
He was thrown out by his mom, which then put him in the hands of very bad people who essentially treated him like an animal, put him in a cage, used him as a spectacle, and would beat him, force him to do all kinds of things. So he has a very difficult relationship with women because of that. And in his book especially, he says that times and times again, and it's why he's never had sex with anyone, because he hates them. The only one that he's ever not hated is Lena.
I'm curious now. I really want to read their book.
Oh, we should.
I mean, I'd be down. I think I'm going to read it.
I'm clearly down. I've read it.
Oh, shut up. Miss Speedy Gonzalez over here reading so many books.
But anyway, it's interesting how you're kind of like, well, he's probably bi. He probably
I think
is.
so.
I feel like he reads that way. Or pan. Maybe pan is more accurate.
Yeah, I could see that. So, there was no book?
No, sadly.
All right.
Sorry. I want it now, though. For sure.
I think it could, I think it could have happened. The idea of him humping the air, something about that, and the sounds he made, and just, I needed it, okay? And that's me saying it. I don't usually read right? So
I know. I would love for her. I feel like I'm spoiling the whole plot of book 2. I'm not. I swear I'm not. But there is more werewolves in book 2.
Oh, okay.
That are introduced, and I would love for her to do a spin-off series.
I wonder if she will.
About the werewolves, because I'd be down for 2 werewolves together. Werewolves, like I said, as it is, they're pretty horny.
I think it's interesting, though, because in this book, they talk about werewolves basically being executed into extinction. They were murdered, and, they scoured the, whole world, basically killing most of them. So I think it's...
No. Actually, what happened is that's true only for the UK.
Oh, okay.
Because in Scandinavian countries, it's the opposite. Or do you remember they said in Paris they executed the blue bloods?
Yeah. Okay.
So it's the opposite, and it's the same for Scandinavian countries where they executed a lot of the blue bloods. Mm-hmm. And so the werewolves there are the majority.
Okay.
So it's kind of like they're doing the opposite. So
I'm really, really intrigued. I think I really want to pick up book 2 soon. Okay, stop. Oh, I wish the listeners can see your face right now.
Can we talk about how fascinating? I mean, we don't know much about the Nightwalkers,
Yeah.
but what we do know is that they are part metal. They are blood drinkers, and they are part metal. Like Rip. Rip has a metal arm.
Yes.
Because obviously when it's in a steampunk world, it's a world that's sort of a past version of London that's also, what if it was more advanced, if that makes sense. Like it's a past version but more advanced, futuristic, in a way that it didn't become futuristic that way. Do you like
I look at it as more like mechanical or like industrial even.
Yeah. But what if that was taken to the extreme, where you have robots walking down the streets, everything is powered by steam, obviously. Some of them have like mechanic limbs. And what's interesting about that is that they're not considered as human because of that.
Well, I mean, they are part robot in a sense.
But they're not. They're still people. Rip is still human.
Yeah.
However, he's not seen as such, and the Nightwalkers are not seen as such.
No,
They're
I
seen
agree.
more as machines than people.
Yeah. And I think that, like, for me, when they described Rip's arm, I pictured, like, okay, Anakin in Star Wars. Like, his arm would resemble that in a way.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, I'm like, he's still, like, Anakin was, like, human looking. He was still, like, I don't know what type of alien he was, but he was basically a humanoid alien. So, like, that's how I kind of pictured it. So, like...
I mean, heck, Seff, it was same, but because you and I would freaking see a reptile and go, but he's a human baby. You know what I mean? Like, we humanize everything.
Anyways, you might have a lizard romance coming up sometime soon. Okay, that is all.
Sure. We might, people. Get ready for that. But yeah, like, this society doesn't see them as such. So it's like, who the fuck is a human then in this world? Because vampires aren't, and then nightwalkers and people that have anything that's not human are not. So who is human in this world?
I think the Blue Bloods honestly think they're the epitome of perfection. They're the epitome of, like, what people should be. And they basically say that everything else that isn't a Blue Blood is lesser than them. And I think that, like, again, that just resembles our society. And it's like, if you're not, like, rich, or if you're not, like, someone with privileges, you're seen as less in some eyes. And, you know, it's crazy, but that's just how that world works.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny that they use the Nightwalkers as, like, their form of security, their form of, I guess, military. But they don't see their own military as human, despite them risking their lives and, like, losing limbs for them.
Yeah.
It's an interesting topic.
I have a question.
Okay.
So you know how Blade explains, like, tells Charlie that the story of when he transitioned and him killing his own sister.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about that.
Okay.
Because he was told that by Vikers. He essentially says that he blacked out, kind of like when he goes into one of his rages. Mm-hmm. He blacked out, couldn't remember what had happened, and then he woke up and he just saw his sister there, lying dead. I'm wondering if Vikers did it. If Vikers, in order to manipulate Blade, made him think that he had killed his sister, but he didn't.
You think it backfired? Because, like, obviously Blade didn't want anything to do with Vikers after that. So, like, do you think, like, his plan backfired? Is that where you're going with this?
What did he... I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just wondering. Because I've always had that doubt. Like, when he explained that story and knowing how Vikers is, I was like, are you sure you're the one who killed her? He might have put your sister there. Like, he might have been the one who drank the entirety of your sister's blood and then killed her off and made you think that you had done it.
It could be that Vikers had, you know, in one of his his vampire rages, drank her to death and left her there for Blade to, you know, believe that he was the one that did that. Or maybe Vikers, being Vikers, got tired of her and just killed her. Or it could just be Blade did that. I honestly, I don't think... I mean, it was a main focal point for Blade's character and, like, why he is the way he is. But yeah, I don't think they dwell too much on it because I just think
No, it's definitely like not something important in the book. It's just when it was said, I was like,
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it past Vikers to do that.
why do you think he wanted honor? Is that a question that you think was answered? I don't think it was answered as much as I would have liked.
I agree. It wasn't answered as much. I think it was more that like Honor was such a strong, like independent woman that knew what she wanted, even when she was part of, I guess, the echelon, like she was part of the 10. Um, like she knew what she wanted and she kept fighting him. Like she was forced to be a prey because he made her that way, but she never wanted him. And I think that was like the allure. Like you know how vampires are like they're always seen as predators, and in the sense, blue bloods are basically the scene like they're seen as perfection. And I think for him, it's more of like a pride thing. Like, why would she not want me? And also, she's running away like every time I try to.
Well, also they literally say, "Do not run away from a vampire or a blue blood or a werewolf.
So
don't run away from them. They think it's a game."
Yeah, so that's why that's what I thought the allure of Honoria was for Vikers.
I think, yeah, but also I think because it's like, okay, he wanted her in part because she had the answers to the cure. He's desperately trying to look for the cure. She's the daughter of the scientist who found the cure, but his journals were are missing, though Honor knows where they are. And she's the only one who can read his like gibberish because he essentially created like a new language. Yeah. So I think he wants her in part for that, but the weird thing is he also wants her in like an obsessive
psycho way. Yeah,
like he wants her as his thrall as well. He wants to possess what she is. I don't know, it was a weird thing, and I don't think I ever really got an answer.
And, like, I think at first, like, the reason why he was so one-dimensional in the sense where, like, I just want honor, I want that cure, is because I feel like, Blade and Honoria were very multifaceted. I feel like as a character, like, both of them were very, like, different. But in sense, like, I don't know, I just feel like Vikers was a weird character. Like, I couldn't figure out a lot of his motives, even though I did understand his ultimate goal.
There's one really interesting scene that does give you a little bit more perspective into who he is, and it's the scene where Honor hides into his study or office, and he's looking at a grave. The grave of one of his thralls that he killed.
Oh, that's the scene where she had hid the diaries in Emily's crypt, like I guess her graveyard, and that's Emily is Blade's sister. And so she was hiding inside of the graveyard, and she saw, she overlooked Vikers grieving.
And later on, she asks him, like, is it because, like, you regret what you did? Like, at least she gets a sense that he regrets what he did to the sister.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting, because he has, like, a moment of mourning, almost, looking at the grave. And so it's almost as if he's regretting what he did, or having a reflecting on what happened or whatnot. Like you what I'm trying to say is that you get the impression that there's more to what he is.
Yeah,
perhaps that there's more complicated feelings in the men.
I agree. And do you think if he was not as far gone into like the virus, like if he wasn't so close to being a vampire, do you think he would have been a villain? Like, if he was, like, way, like, maybe, like, even, like 20 years into the past, like, do you think, like, he would have been, like... Because, like, you have to keep in mind, like, every decision he's made in, like, the past maybe 5 years has been because of, like, how far gone he is into the virus.
But he created Blade, and Blade wasn't the only one that he created. He purposefully infected young kids. Because he wanted to see what would happen.
That is true.
So I do think there's... it's pretty,
Yeah. I just feel like his character was interesting to me in that sense that, vampirism, like, is a spectrum in this book. Like, like, you start off full, like, human, but you like the taste of blood. And then it just continues on to the point where, like, you're so far gone, you've lost all your humanity, and the only thing you have is the idea of blood, sating you. So yeah, I just thought that was so interesting to me because like obviously we're used to vampires, you know, being sexy, sure of like their bloodlust and all of that. So I thought this like it was really interesting.
Even Rip, because Rip obviously almost dies in this book, and then in order to save him, Blade gives him some of his blood, so he gets infected, and then he
Yeah.
gets turned into a blue blood. But even Rip in his novella, which he has a .5 novella after this book, with Esme, he's struggling with his need for blood. So that's interesting because, like you said, it's a spectrum. Like it changes as your levels go up. And in the very beginning, Rip drinks most of his blood cold because he can't control it. He would drink someone to death. Like but as your levels go up, you get used to the virus, and eventually you're able, like Blade, to just take small quantities and control yourself, and then eventually you go back to not being able to control yourself.
I feel like that's like resembling life in itself. Like, you know, like you start off unsure of yourself, unsure of the world, and like you're nervous about everything, and then like you reach a point in your life where I don't know how many years for some people, it's like, yeah, you know what? I'm living a good life. I have everything sorted out. And then your independence, like you depend solely on yourself. And then later on, as years go by, you are dependent again on other people. And
you're more worried.
Yes, exactly.
Yep. And you do sort of lose a little bit of yourself.
You do.
I mean, in some cases, completely when, Alzheimer and such.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is sort of like that. You're right. Like, yeah.
Look at us getting deep.
It's just a book about vampires, guys.
I know, like,
and here we are, like,
so much into it. Oh god.
But I mean, that's kind of what happens when you get a book that's so ambiguous.
Yes.
I appreciate the ambiguity of this book because it allows for us to have like these sort of discussions. Because if it was just one way, here's how the vampires are, and here's how they react to things, and like, I feel like we wouldn't be able to have these conversations. But because of how she created this world and created the vampires and the characters, we're able to go a little bit deeper than that.
Yeah, I agree. Can I also just say, like, I loved Honoria's character. Like, I loved how mature she was and like how independent she was. Like, she had her goals. And, like, she knew what she wanted from life. But, like, I feel like once Blade came into the picture, he obviously shook her perspective of what blue bloods were like, what vampires were like. And obviously she had to reevaluate herself and reevaluate her prejudices. Like, I thought she was a really mature character. And I love that she even voiced it to him, too. Like, she wasn't just be like, like, internally. It wasn't an internal struggle. She actually voiced that she didn't know what she wanted from the relationship with him. I just loved her character. I love how mature she was.
So often in romance, characters have these conversations internally.
Yeah.
But it's never voiced. Mm-hmm. And in this book, they actually talk about it, which is nice. Like, they actually voice their concerns, their struggles, their questions, their confusions. Like, it's good. In that way.
I have it right here. I have it saved. And like, I just felt like it was such a great moment because of like, I'm so used to, as you said, characters internalizing their problems and like their beliefs. And like, I love that she fully told him, because he was kind of disappointed with her, answer that she didn't know. And, she says, I don't know. I'm still trying to work out what I feel. She saw his face and grabbed his sleeve as he moved a step back. You wanted the truth between us? I'm sorry. Then, but this is how I feel. I'm so confused. There's been so much going on with Charlie and losing my employment, and then you're not who I thought you were. So she's being honest, and she's telling him that she doesn't, like, you gotta give her, like, a few minutes, or even longer than that, because she just doesn't know. It's something new for her.
Yeah.
And I love that she voices it.
Yeah, and you have, in this book, a feminine figure that's very strong, independent, etc. But it's so nice to see her have a moment where she just, especially the moment where she realizes how selfish she was towards her
Yeah.
brother. Like, to see her crumble and actually show how sometimes it's just a facade. You know what I mean? Like, you're faking it till you make it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I don't have my shit together. I don't.
Yeah.
You know, and she, up till that point, she was trying so hard to keep it up, to keep up the pretense, especially like in her job.
Yeah.
She's still wearing clothes as if she's still rich
Like
and
a rich
living a
girl.
life. Yeah, but she's not. But she's trying so hard to hold on to that.
I know.
And then eventually she's like, I don't have this.
Yeah.
I don't have my shit together.
Yeah.
I need to figure myself out.
And I love that. Like, I don't know, I just feel like it was such a feminist moment. And like you said, she's a very, like, strong, independent woman. And, like, I just love that she was like, you know what? Like, I am allowed to say what I want to say. And I think Blade was such a great character for her and a great companion because, like, yeah, sure, he was at first, like, he didn't understand what she was doing and he didn't understand why she kept pulling away. But I felt like once he heard that, he's like, you know what? She needs her space to figure this out because she's lived her whole life hating on blue bloods and seeing how awful they could be. She needs her space. And I love that they were like, at that point, that's when they decided, okay, you know what? Let's explore this. Let's see where this can go. I just loved her.
Yeah. And I love Blade. He's just, I feel like I rarely, if ever, use the word fabulous to describe a male character, but I feel like it kind of fits him. He's just so into his clothes. He's so into, like, his appearance, his hair. Like, obviously he has, like, the Cockney accent, which doesn't really fit the pompous persona.
Yeah.
But, like, he's very flashy, I guess is a better word than fabulous. He's very flashy. And he loves it.
I loved reading him work his blade. Like, the way he, like, I'm just picturing, like, him, like, one of those crazy, like, blade people that, like, do all those tricks. That's what I was picturing. And I'm like, ooh, I'm digging it. That's so hot. Like, you keep flipping those blades.
I wonder if it's, like, if he's the way he is as a way to, like, mock the Dukes, the echelon.
Oh, you
like,
think?
If he wears clothes like them.
Oh, yes. And
then he's like, but I'm in Whitechapel. I am the devil of Whitechapel, and yet, look at me. I am... Because his, like... I don't know what I'm trying to say, but, like, his home, for example, like, he's from the exterior, and from, like, everyone that goes into his house only sees, like, a crumbling place.
Yeah. It's just a facade.
You go up a level and he lives very lavishly. He has a beautiful home, but he doesn't want to show people that. And I think the flashiness of him is very performative. Like, it's only, he's just trying to portray something. And I feel like that is in part, like, as a way to mock high society in a way.
Yeah, because everything's kept behind closed doors. Yeah.
Because it's a mockery of them, too, when he's made a duke.
Exactly.
You know, look at me. What's his name? What's his actual name? James?
No, his name is Sir Henry. He's a knight. He gets dubbed a knight.
We don't learn his name, his actual name, till, like...
the end?
The very, very end. And it's so funny, because Honor is like, wait, that's your name? And he's like, yeah, shush, never say it again. It's a funny scene. Because she's like, oh, do I start calling you that now? And he's like, don't you dare.
Because, like, he's been going by Blade for how long? It's just like, you know, he identifies as Blade, so call him Blade. But, anyways, what do you think, or who do you think the monster of the story is?
I feel like we've gone over that.
We've talked
multiple times already.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like... I don't know. Can you think of anything else, or is there any point that you want to go a little deeper into?
For me, I was kind of looking, because I wanted to look for something that wasn't, you know, the obvious, like, you know, that rabid vampire, or, like, it wasn't about, like, her prejudices, which we already talked upon. Touched upon. Her prejudices towards the blue bloods and, like, her past with living with a ton, like, we already talked about that. But I also, like, for me, I also kind of saw the monster as, like, the idea of, like, the what ifs, like what the future could be like, because, like, for him, we knew early on that he was going to become a vampire sometime soon. He was going to he's close to the fade. And, like, the idea of a future for him doesn't, like, it didn't really click in until he met Honor and, like, started to know her more. And that's when he was like, damn, I wish I had more time with her because she's, an amazing woman. And if I met her a few years in the past, I would have wanted her to be my wife. But he's like, now that path isn't open for me. So I think for me, like, the idea of, like, the what if, like, what our future could have been like was kind of his monster because he didn't fully let go and be with her until after he realized, oh wait, my levels are actually going down. And that's when he was finally like, I don't know, I read it as like the burden on his shoulders were like, it was lighter because he was like, actually I can have that future that I wanted.
I feel like we really need to talk about book 2 because
We can't.
That question of Blade is reopened in that book in such an interesting way, and I feel like it's not like, you're like, oh, his levels are going down, etc., etc., but I think she pushes it a little bit deeper than that, or a little bit further than that, and in a really interesting way. So I feel like it could bring about a new conversation. Anyways, I don't want to say too much.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't really think of anything else. I mean, definitely, like, white men being at the tippy top of society and, holding on for dear life to their power and putting everything into place for, patriarchy and
not bowing out gracefully, like not bowing out when, it's your time. Like, Vikers needed to get gone years ago.
Yeah, but also, like, how even when sometimes you think women are being empowered, are they really, or is it just a performative thing?
Yeah.
Like, sort of in the sense of like the queen. I'm trying to voice something here that I'm not doing a very good job at.
Okay.
I'm thinking of, like, the queen and how you think she's in control, you think has power, but actually she doesn't.
Yeah.
It's a lot more ambiguous than that, and I kind of think that that's a thing too. Like, I was listening to someone yesterday who was saying it's kind of unrelated, but kind of related in the same. So I'm going on a tangent, everyone. Follow me along.
Fair warning.
Makeup. I was listening to someone talk about makeup and saying how good it is to see more male in makeup. Mm-hmm. And up front, you think, well, yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, like, you're seeing more men start wearing makeup, and that's becoming more and more of a normal thing.
Yeah.
But the argument that the person was saying is that men have always been a part of the makeup world. A lot of the makeup companies are owned by men, and those men were the ones who put these standards into place. Yes. Men have always had a hand into this world of appearances and such. So you think it's a very, feminine world, which I'm using feminine, I don't want to say female, but, like, you think it's a very closed world that men are starting to say, like, hey, maybe we want to be a part of this or whatnot. Like, I'm not doing a very good job. Makeup is becoming a more fluid thing. However, what this person was saying is that actually men have always been a part of it, but they weren't a part of it that was visible. And yet the impact that they had on it was so vast.
But that's only a recent thing, if you think about it. Because who invented heels? It was men. Who wanted to wear the biggest wig? Who wanted to wear, like, the whitest face makeup and, like, the blush? It was men. Men wore makeup. Men wore heels before women did. And until recently, they were seen as something that should not be the norm for men.
No, but that's what I'm trying to say, is that men have had an invisible hand onto a lot of things that you wouldn't, like, it's not new. Mm-hmm. Men are in part behind a lot of beauty standards nowadays that are crushing to some women. Yeah. And so that's what I'm trying to get at with, like, the prince consort having this hold onto the queen that, is perhaps not visible, but he's there. He's the one
pulling her strings.
Holding the strings.
Yeah. Oh, see, there you go. We're back. My antenna is straight.
Maybe it was mine that was cute. Anywho, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Okay.
It's an interesting question that certainly we see in our world, and I think that's in part a monster. Like, we have to destroy that.
I agree.
But besides that, I think we've talked about most of the things, like humanity.
And like you said, society was a huge monster in this book, for sure.
Yeah.
But, last question. Would you like to switch places with any of the characters in this book?
No.
Why?
This world is too gritty.
It's not for me.
I think. Me either. Like, no. It's too dark, too gritty, too dirty.
It's not, okay, it's not the idea that it's too, like, dark or gritty. For me, it's more of, like, I don't want the plague. I don't want to be a blue blood and then become a nasty vampire, or live in a world where, like, I'm fearing I'm going to be attacked by a rabid vampire zombie. Like, it's not a place that I would want to be.
Plus, if you're neither of those things, you're probably someone's thrall. That's your only perspective of success in life, is becoming someone's thrall.
Yeah.
So
that is true.
I don't want that either.
Yeah, I don't
want
want
to be food. Unless it's Nikolai.
Wrong series, Marge.
In which case, please and thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if it's Kresley Cole's world, for sure, I would be, in there. Show me the portal, Mariketa, come get me through a mirror. Like, let's go.
Yes. Anyway, not in this world.
Yeah, same. I don't even think I'd survive in this world, to be honest. I won't be taking the portal to this world. I'll pass it. All right.
Yes. I feel like we actually didn't really talk about, like, the plot. But beyond what you said. But
we didn't. I felt like, because I don't know, as you said, I felt like this book was very ambiguous, but it was also, like, rich in possibilities and ideas that, like, we all, like, I'm saying all, like, there's more than just you and me. There's my ghost.
And there's your listeners.
That's true. But yeah, what I'm saying is, like, it was just so much, like, that if you dug deeper, you would have seen a lot more things to talk about. And I felt like the plot, while it was good and, like, it kept me on the edge of my seat.
Yeah.
I just, like, I don't know, looking deeper, there's more to talk about, and which I really, really appreciated.
Which I think is more interesting in some ways. So
yeah. So
we've had good conversations today, Seff.
We did.
I'm happy.
Me too. I hope it translates to a good episode, though.
Hopefully it's somewhat funny. I don't know.
At least we're not, like, reading quotes like we did for Couture and Lord Death. Like, that was just,
We quoted the whole book. That podcast is essentially an audiobook.
Exactly. Except you get to listen to our voices the whole time.
Yeah. All right. Is this it?
Yeah, this is it.
All right. So thanks, everyone, for joining us today to talk about Kiss of Steel by Beck McMaster. Next week, we're reading Dark Needs at Night's Edge. It's Conrad's book. We're going back to the IAD world. So I hope you're excited for that. You can find us on social media at Romance and the Monsters Podcast on Instagram or the RTM Pod on Twitter, and also at Romance and the Monsters Podcast at gmail.com. And you can find me on social media at Foes and Lovers on both Twitter and Instagram.
And you can find me, Seff, on both Twitter and Instagram at Pros with Woes. That's it. I hope they're excited for Conrad's book.
We're gonna find out who the frick is the ghost, people!
Finally!
I mean, we know. Spoiler alert, we've already recorded that episode. All right. Thanks for listening.
All right.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.